All right, so we'll start the session. So firstly, I would like to thank all the participants for joining in today. So today, for a change, we're not going to talk about a particular product or a particular investment philosophy of any Indian fund house, but we're going to talk about the most discussed investment philosophy in and around the world. So today we've invited two, gentlemen from Motilal Oswal, Mr. Akhil Chaturvedi and Mr. Sushmit. So the whole idea of organizing this session is to give you perspective on what has been discussed in the recent past in Berkshire Hathaway's AGM. And well, I was a part of the whole discussion. In fact, I remember in 2016, particularly, I remember thanks to Akhil, I traveled with him to Omaha and attended Berkshire Hathaway's AGM. Well, this was a different experience altogether. I think it was like a pilgrimage for me where I saw around 40,000 people coming together, and most of them were from different part of the world and attended the session. So it was a great amount of learning. So the whole idea is, I thought, why not to organize this event, invite from people from Motilal Oswal. So let me start the session. So before we start, I'll give you the little bit of introduction. So I have invited Mr. Akhil Chaturvedi. Akhil heads the sales team at Motilal Oswal AMC. Well, Akhil has over 2 decades of experience, out of which he spent about 7.5 years, around 8 years with Motilal Oswal, and he had long stint with Birla Mutual Fund as well before Motilal Oswal. And under his able guidance, he was a part of core team initially at Motilal Oswal, where I had an opportunity to work with him and learn a lot in terms of how do you scale the business. And under his able guidance, Motilal Oswal AMC has moved from almost 1,000 crores of AUM to about 40,000 crores of AUM. And we also have Sushmit. Sushmit has around 15 years of experience, out of which he spent almost a decade with Motilal Oswal. And before becoming a part of the MC team and heading the fund management team, he was part of the institutional, research and broking business, where he used to interact with most of the FIIs and used to deal with them in and around and try and understand more in terms of how the Indian market looks like. So he has good amount of experience in terms of dealing with global investors, so to say. So what we'll do is, Akhil, the format of the show is very simple. So what we do is, we keep at AIF and PMS Experts India, we keep organizing these knowledge-based sessions, and the whole idea is to educate and empower investors. And so that's the reason I invited all of you, and thank you so much for accepting my request, Akhil and Sushmit, for taking the time out from your busy schedule and joining in today. So what we're gonna do is, Akhil, I'll start with you first. And you have been attending Berkshire Hathaway's AGM, and Motilal Oswal as an organization have been following the philosophy of Mr. Warren Buffett. I remember, I think 1993, Mr. Ramdev Agrawal met Mr. Warren Buffett for the first time, and that's how the journey began. So if you could throw some more lights in terms of what has been your biggest learning so far, and then probably we'll move to Sushmit.
Thank you, Vikas. Thank you for the kind introduction, and it's been great working with you as well. And you have this great entrepreneurship spirit in you, which has probably taken you to get into the entrepreneurship mode itself. And I've been noticing a lot of work which you have been doing digitally, and so congratulations for that, and my best wishes to you. You've been great on the in the professional side. I'm sure you'll be good in your new venture which you're currently doing. Although late in the hour, but finally you remembered me and you called us. So it's our
No, the
privilege.
whole idea is, Akhil, we were building up the background before we invite, both
Yeah,
of you. So I'm
yeah,
happy to have now. We are getting very good overwhelmed support from all the investors. So thank you for coming.
absolutely. Thank you. So coming to your question, so basically all of us, those who are in the investing world, those who are not in investing world, all of us, we've kind of we know about Warren Buffett, right? Who he is and what he does and all his success stories. I've also grown up listening to all kind of great stories about Mr. Buffett, and how he made enormous wealth by investing into equities, by following simple rules, simple philosophy, and just kind of following it for years and years and years together, and you eventually become a billionaire, right? Uh, when I joined Motilal Oswal AMC, obviously our chairman and our founder, Mr. Ramdev Agarwal, obviously used to visit Berkshire Hathaway AGM every year for now, I think 20-25 years. And in 2015 is where he kind of started to take us also along to experience this great pilgrimage. I think the right word you used was pilgrimage. And along with our business partners, we started to travel for the Berkshire Hathaway AGM for 5 years in a row. So at least I've had the privilege of going there every year from 2015 till 2019. Unfortunately, 2020 and 2021, because of lockdown, uh, we could not really attend that, and even they had to do the AGM virtually. But in the 5 years, obviously, while the technical side, I'm sure Sushmit, being a fund manager, he'll be able to throw more light. But as an investor, as a professional in the investing business, and I've been part of the mutual fund business for over 20 years, as you rightly said. Clearly, in the last 5 years, some things I saw repeatedly, some messaging which I saw repeatedly were, and I've actually noted on, I was trying to pull out all the notes which I used to kind of make when I used to attend. So I'll just keep doing right, left, so that I don't forget any point. I think one thing he always reiterates again and again, whether it's the AGM or his interviews, is basically to invest in a business which you understand, right? So if you're putting your hard-earned money, your savings, to buy a particular business, the business should make sense to you. You should have full, complete understanding of what you're buying, what the company is into, what are the company's competitive advantages, what is the growth outlook. So you need to have a complete understanding of the company you buy, so that in long run this company can help you compound your wealth for a good future. So that's, I think, something which he repeats all the time. The second thing, obviously, he recommends is that everyone should read a lot. So your education actually doesn't complete after you do your graduation or your post graduation or you get a professional degree. You have to have a learning mindset all through your life. And what I've heard, I think, through many stories, is that in his office, I think 80% of the time he spends reading rather than actually doing office work. And this reading helps him to basically understand businesses better and just understand the macro environment better, and everything, whatever he needs, he gets from the books. I don't have the exact count. I don't know, Sushmit, if you know, but he reads, I don't know what, a book a day, one book per day type. I think, that's the kind of number we hear. So in our personal lives, we should also embed this habit of reading. I was not a good reader, but hearing this message again and again, I also started to read, and definitely it helps you a lot. And read something what you love to read, so that you enjoy, and you take learnings and insights from that. The third thing in investing is, of course, diversification, which he talks about. So diversification is good, but diversification to a limit is good. So have concentrated portfolios, fewer bets, good bets that will help you make a lot of money. Very important point from investors' perspective is not to have a herd mentality. This is more like a behavior finance, or an investment bias. Most often, what we see is that when markets are very good, the markets are rolling, we end up putting a lot of money, and when the reverse happens, we start to pull out money. That's called the herd mentality, right? So we should, and there is a beautiful quote when you come to talk on this topic, is that be greedy when others are fearful, and be fearful when others are greedy. So you need to think very differently. You need to be more excited when markets are tanking. And in fact, any book you read written by successful equity investors, most of the successful equity investors have made most money by investing in depressed times, not in bullish times, but in bearish times. So don't have the herd mentality approach. Have your own individual mindset. Don't fear, don't panic when markets correct. In fact, volatility and market correction are always your best friends, rather than your enemies. Third thing important, equity is all about long term. And long term is not, you cannot define long term as 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year. Long term is, I mean, if you manage to get one right business, then as long as the business is good, good time to sell this business is never. So if you get the right horse, and if you're betting on the right horse, as long as the horse is giving you the right wins, you continue to hold forever and ever. So generally when we talk to investors, everybody will tends to ask us that what is the kind of return you're looking at, what is the kind of returns you look in 3 year, 5 year. I mean, this is not a fixed deposit. uh, Equities is all about participating in the business. It's like you are buying pieces of businesses, right? And you are a shareholder of that business, and if the business is doing good, why even think of selling out, right? So have a very, very long term approach in your equity investing, especially. Markets will test you, markets will test your patience. Those who pass the test make a lot of money, and very few people actually pass that test of living through 3 or 4 5 cycles and end up making a lot of money. uh, there are a lot of learnings, but I'll conclude here. And this is the famous quote, which is, there are two important rules in investing. Rule number one: never lose money. And rule number two is never forget rule number one. So be very, very mindful of what you buy. And there is where, the first point I made is buy what you understand. uh, buy great managements, buy good growth stories, uh, and then let it just compound. So don't buy anything which will end up making you lose money. And never forget that rule. So I'll probably, so these were few of my learnings. Maybe I'll stop here in interest of time. And uh, I thought I'll share all of these with you.
Sure,
Thank you so
sure.
much.
Thank you so much. So going to Susmit now. Susmit, I know you've been tracking US markets particularly for quite some time now, and you've been tracking global markets. So you saw that recently both the legendary investor came together and concluded their Berkshire Hathaway's AGM despite pandemic. Of course, they did not allow anybody to come in the meeting room. But what has been the key takeaways from the session, according to you, Susmit?
Thank you, Vikas, for inviting us. It's really a privilege to talk to your clients. Hope everyone is safe. So, every time I see them on the stage, what hits me is their age, right? I mean, they're 90 plus, and that is really the most staggering aspect. Everything else, according to me, is what you can try to learn. But you can learn, as Akhil rightly said, you can read a book every day, but if you don't live till 90, there's really no way of compounding that wealth and the knowledge, right? So, just to give you one factoid before we jump into what happened in the last AGM, at the age of 40, Mr. Buffett's net worth was $100 million, right? And at the age of 70, his net worth was $60 billion, right? So just to give you some Indian numbers, if you were worth a crore at the age of 40, he made it 600 crores at the age of 70, right? So that is what age does to you, right? In a way, the only, they say that the only good thing about aging is compounding is working for you. Mangar said a beautiful line in the AGM, which I'm still trying to internalize. He said that the best part about being a 90 and 95-year-old CEO is we age very slowly, right? Because 1 year divided by 90 is only 1% aging, right? So it's very interesting how they think about it. But yeah, whenever I look at them on stage, the first thing that hits me is the age, and that's where what Akhil said is so true, that you have to love what you do, and if you keep doing that, then you can live for very long. Just to keep that on the background, what the five, I would say, points that Mr. Buffett and Mr. Munger made in the AGM that is resonating with me. I think the first is very, very important for the times that we live in, where we are seeing this polarization in markets. Up until 3-4 months ago, almost all returns were being accounted by 5 stocks in the US, 3 stocks in India, and everybody thought that this is how world is going to be. So Mr. Buffett put up a very interesting data point. He said nothing is permanent, and he said that the best are always very heavy with expectations, right? So, if you look at the top 20 companies in the world today, 13 of them are US companies, and the same number 30 years ago, out of the top 20, 13 were Japanese companies, and today there are zero Japanese companies in top 20. Right? So just think about this: that over a 30-year period, top 20 companies, you had 65% Japanese companies, and today you have zero. Right? So I think so the only thing, so you cannot be the best in every cycle, right? Even companies can't be. If companies can't be, it makes it very difficult for investors to be, right? So, and one associated line that he said, and I really like that. He said that hence, we'll make a lot of money for people, but we will disappoint people when we'll not make as much money as they think, right? So there's a small difference, but a huge message in it, right? You'll make a lot of money in equity as long as you remain with the fund, but if you think you'll make every year a lot of money, that's not a feasible thing. The second message, which so somebody asked Buffett and Munger that what is your role at Berkshire Hathaway, and Mr. Buffett said, "I'm Chief Risk Officer," and Munger said, "I'm Chief Cultural Officer." Right now, if you think about this in life as well, typically our spouses are our Chief Culture Officer, right? And our job until we start earning, the Chief Risk Officer are our parents, and once we start earning and settle, it's our job. So that's how even businesses are. Even when you're doing portfolios, investing, you should always keep these in mind, that your wealth manager or your advisor, like Vikas, are your chief risk officers, and you are really your own culture officer. Right? You have to decide what works for you, what does not work for you. The third aspect is this is a line that I've always thought about this, but as usual, Mr. Munger puts it beautifully. He says that if you expect perfection in your spouse or your friends or in your companies, forget it. Right? And I think it is so true. All of us, we keep pointing out the small things in either the stocks we own, the portfolios we own, the advice we get, our friends, our spouses, but there is nothing called perfection. We should strive for perfection, but there is nothing called perfection. I think very interesting message, and I always say that investing, buying a stock or a portfolio is like marrying, right? It's not like dating. You will always you can always think that you will do better, but the joy is not in doing better, but the joy is in staying in that relationship for 20-25 years, right? And if you see today, the WhatsApp or the meme that is going around is very good, where they say that you may have got Covaxin, but everybody wants Covishield. So it's something like that. But as long as you have both doses and you stick to the discipline of mask, you will be okay. The fourth message is that if you are not confused with what is going on in the world today, you don't understand it. Again, very, very powerful message. These are really unprecedented, uncharted times. Don't expect anyone to have a perfect solution. Nobody knows. Right? Nobody knows. Nobody knew the second wave will be as bad. Nobody knew revenge buying will be so crazy. Nobody knew steel prices will go up so much. And so, if you think anybody knew, some people will get it right, not because they knew it, but because they took a probability event. Right? So, if you are confused, if you think, I'm not able to decide what I want to do with the money, it's very natural. These are those crazy times. So, that's the other message. And the last one, was that these are very different situations versus 2009. So don't make those comparisons. In 2009, there were a few private enterprises which were failing, and hence the government action was delayed. Today, it is the government which is failing, and hence government action is faster than we think. So, these were really the five big messages that I drew from the AGM.
Sure, sure. Great, Sushmit. So apart from some of the admissions, like Warren Buffett, I remember clearly and categorically mentioned that he sold Apple stocks, etc. But they also talked about selling airline stocks. So what could have been the reason, Sushmit, according to you?
Yeah, I think he gave a very interesting explanation. We may agree to disagree, but I'll just say what he said. His point was that it was clear that the airline companies will need some support from the government, right? Either loan waiver or equity infusion, some tax waiver, something. Now, Berkshire Hathaway, before the pandemic, owned 10% of all airline companies, all the major airline companies in the US. Okay. So his point was that if I continue to hold 10% and these people went to the government and asked for a bailout, they'll say, why don't you go to Berkshire? He has so much money, they'll give you the bailout. And I think maybe that's what he says. That's why he had to sell so that these guys could get the government bailout. It is interesting he said that because if you remember 2009, he came on the press, he subscribed to Goldman Sachs warrants and gave confidence to the entire world on the banking system, right? So in 2009, he bought something and gave confidence to the world. And probably in 2020, he sold something to save a sector. So it's very debatable, but I think this is what the explanation they gave. And if you take a step back and think about what else could be the reason, I really think that business travel is going to change dramatically pre-COVID, post-COVID. I think Zoom is going to be a part of our life, and you used to, and I'm sure Vikas will also remember those days where we used to fly into a city, do one meeting, and come back, right? Travel for 6-7 hours, do a meeting for 1 hour and come back. I don't think those things are coming back. Right? So I think commercial air travel will change. That is my long-term fundamental view. But Mr. Buffett said in order to save the airline is why he sold them. Very interesting.
Yeah, the other observation, Sushmit, is that as Berkshire Hathaway, particularly the company, they've been sort of reducing their exposure in banking sector per se. Whereas banking sector plays very, very important role. You talk about emerging economies, or you talk about even to an extent developed economies. I mean, of course, the way a Nasdaq is constructed today is you have 50-60% contribution coming from technologies, but then bank and NBFCs particularly plays very, very important role. So what is your sense? Why do you think they're reducing their exposure?
See, again, we need to understand what they did. See, they I think just before the pandemic, they nearly owned 11-12% of Bank of America. And when the pandemic hit, they didn't want to have that high an exposure and brought it down to below 10%. Again, this crisis is a unique crisis because it all unraveled so fast and became better also so fast. And so looking back in hindsight, it feels like a bad decision by Mr. Buffett. But imagine if you hold 12% of the largest bank of the US and the world is collapsing around you. Let's not forget all the banks are leveraged companies at the end of the day, right? They all have leverage of 7 times, 8 times, 10 times. They say, what should you do? What is the first thing you should do when a crisis comes is reduce your leverage, correct? That's the advice that we all give to each other as well. And I think that's what they did. They wanted to bring down the leverage companies that they had, and banks are the most leveraged. And that's why I think they sold. I don't think Mr. Buffett and Mr. Munger in their dreams even thought that these things will become so good so fast. That's why there's this famous quote where he says that it's not enough. If I told you in 1945 that I can get you a newspaper of 2021, but I can only get you one section of the newspaper, which one will you ask for, right? 99 out of 100 people ask for the economic section, but actually you need the market section because economy may down, but markets may still be up. So I think that their prediction about the economy was right, that it will go through a big turmoil, but I think markets did something very different than what they thought.
All right. The other thing is this time, Sushmit, both Charlie and Warren, both of them really defended the buyback big time. So what do you think? What could have been the reason?
No, I think, again, they have a very simple mental model when it comes to buyback. And this has been consistent for the last 40, 50 years. I think they wrote about buybacks in the annual report of 1968, where they very simply said that if I'm buying my own stock at less than intrinsic value, then I'm adding value to the shareholders. Right? It's as simple as that. Now, in this last 3 years, when interest rates have gone nearly to zero, this whole buyback has become very complicated, because what companies have started doing is they've started borrowing at 1% and doing buyback, right? And justifying, saying that if I can borrow at 1% and my earnings yield of company is 5%, what is wrong? Right? So mathematically, it's not wrong, but I think morally it is wrong, if you ask me, right? Because you are inflating your own stock by borrowing, right? Which is nothing but, in India, we don't have that kind of financial, I would say, jugglery still. But in India, what companies do is they show profits by borrowing and, by putting it inside working capital. Very, very similar. So I think their point was that as long as you do buybacks, where you think that the value of the business is more than the share price, it is great. And if you do anything else, it is wrong. And I agree with them. Now, the next question is, what is the intrinsic value of the company? How do I judge it, etc., etc.? Frankly, who is a better person to judge that than promoters? Yeah. So, I think the promoters know what the intrinsic value is. And, just to give you an experience of Motilal Oswal, we've done 2 large buybacks over the last 10 years. One was done at 90 rupees. The other was done at 450 to 550. So I think promoters know very well when their share price is lower than the long-term intrinsic value of the company.
All right, Sushmit. So we'll go to Akhil again. So
Yeah.
Akhil, the other thing which I wanted to know, so you've been attending these Berkshire Hathaway's AGM, you attend, kind of shared your experience also. But 2 or 3 things. One, I saw that Berkshire Hathaway's AGM was, the overall company has also underperformed for many years, and we saw that there are times when the cycle is not followed well, and therefore even the quality portfolios sometimes underperforms and then bounce back eventually. So, and unfortunately, most of the investors don't make it, and they either get panic or they redeem. So what is your message to them?
So message is very, very clear that spend a lot of time understanding the philosophy of the fund managers you're buying into. Spend a lot of time doing that. Then reflect the same philosophy into the underlying portfolios, whether that connection is there or not. Try and assess if you have the wherewithal to look at the fundamentals of the portfolio. So you look at same things, how are the businesses good businesses? Do the businesses look growth oriented? Is the portfolio available at a reasonable valuations, which Sushmit was talking about, intrinsic value? So ensure that the funds or the stocks you're buying, there is a significant margin of safety. Once you've done that, you invest, and then you stay there for long term. And in this long term, whether it is 5 years or 10 years, whatever period it may be, you will go through cycles of, they say that one long term is made up of several short terms, right? So eventually, over a very, very long period of time, a good manager will definitely outperform. But in that one long term, there would be bouts of underperformances, and that could be because of various situations. I mean, we are going through a similar situation today in India as well, where for the last 3 years, the rally in the market has been very, very polarized. The rotation in sectors is happening very, very fast. Broadly, active managers would be managing diversified portfolios, trying to own quality businesses. And if there is a high beta rally, then obviously active managers with quality orientation will tend to underperform, which means that they will perform. So in absolute terms, the returns may look very, very good. But the moment you put a benchmark, then suddenly you may feel that I'm not happy with my return, because had I put just in the benchmark, I would have made a higher return. So if you stick to if you stick to a style for a reasonably long period of time, I'm quite of the opinion that you should not be disappointed in terms of outperformance. But if I connect this to what Warren says all the time, and I've heard this, every time I've heard his AGM or read his articles as well, is that if you can't do this, what I've told you, you can't assess a manager, or you're not happy with the performance, the manager will do his job, stick to his philosophy, do what he understands. If you're not happy, then you should go and buy the index itself. And he always propagates buying into S&P 500 index. Every AGM you hear, there will be 2 or 3 comments around uh, investors who cannot choose an active manager or identify good businesses, then simply just participate in the market by buying into the best index with the most long-term track record. And in US, it is S&P 500. In India, it could be Nifty 50, right? So that is what I would connect the dots with. But be prepared when you put money with fund managers, active fund managers who are not replicating the index. Their portfolios are far away from the index, uh, and they have a style, and their styles will go through cycles. But over a long period of time, eventually they will end up creating a lot of wealth. So in short term, you can experience all kind of situations, but that is what probably the markets are testing, your patience. And assess your manager, talk to the manager, understand the philosophy, try to bring in the faith once again, understand the fundamentals, and that should give you the confidence. What you are owning in your portfolio should give you more confidence than what the outcomes are there in the short term. Berkshire Hathaway is underperforming for the last 15 years. Everybody knows that. He also knows that, right? But he's sticking to his philosophy. And he is also making mistakes. He's also correcting his mistakes. But if you like his style, if you like Buffett, eventually, Sushmit has given some of the numbers, $600 million. Oh, sorry, what was that? 600 million becoming 100 million, becoming 600 billion.
60 billion.
I mean, what is underperformance, outperformance? I mean, if your wealth is compounded by 18-20% per annum, what underperformance and what outperformance? You made it in life. So eventually, after 10 years, if benchmark does 15% and an active manager does 16%, 17%, or even 14.5%, really doesn't make much difference. But yes, in short term, it can distract you. I think all these things are distraction in your long-term investing journey. So if you can avoid that, stick to your belief in yourself and your portfolio manager. I think eventually you will make a lot of money. And even if you take, and I'm sure a lot of viewers or participants in the call would be long-term investors, look at any fund which has completed 15 years, 20 years. They may not be the top ranked fund, but all these funds have given you much higher returns than the benchmark. In absolute terms, they would have compounded. Worst fund would have compounded at 15%. Right. So if you have lived this journey of 20 years in funds which have completed this kind of a duration, and you have compounded your wealth at 15%, 15% means doubling of money every 5 years. Right. In 20 years, you have doubled your money 4 times. Right. So in 5 years, you double. In 10 years, you're 4 times. And in 20 years, you're 16 times. Now, what underperformance and what outperformance, right? 1 crore is becoming 16 crores.
Yeah, thank you, Akhil. The other thing is, Akhil, if you look at last decade per se, between 2010 to 20, in dollar term, Indian markets, it's like a lost out the journey, because in dollar term, Indian equities would have delivered hardly 5.5% returns, or around 5%.
In fact, it's
Whereas
negative. Sushmita has the numbers, I believe.
yeah,
In
whereas
dollar terms, we are negative 33%, I believe.
correct. Whereas Nasdaq has clearly made it big time, and Motilal Oswal was the first AMC to launch Nasdaq 100 fund at that point of time. I remember.
10 years back.
10 years back. And other day I was looking at the performance. I saw that good amount of compounding, as you rightly said. Both compounding and the performance both goes hand on hand and work together. So what do you think going ahead? Does it make sense for Indian investors? And there are many investors who, when I talked about that I'm organizing a session with you all, they had sent me questions on this regard. So they all are curious to know, does it make sense for them to also have exposure in US market even at these valuations?
So, two parts to this answer, into this question. One, from diversification perspective, certainly I would recommend, and now that investors have started to look at investing outside of India, so from de-risking yourself, from diversification perspective, and from hedging yourself against dollar, you should certainly look at investing outside of India. What proportion you should invest? If you are a fresh investor, you should look at starting with 10%, and then depending on as you get comfort, you can slowly increase it to maybe 20-25%. So I would, in strict financial planning terms, I would say certainly one should diversify outside of India, right? So spread your risk in different asset classes. Now, uh, obviously, US has been the best performing asset class in the last 10 years. And even in the recent future, last 1 year returns of US has been very good. And within US, I think NASDAQ or the FANG stocks, the returns have been kind of outliers. Of course, we are seeing the mean reversion now. In the last few months, we are seeing that mean reversion happening. But yes, uh, valuations look slightly stretched. So my suggestion would be to look at, do invest in US, but look at a more diversified index like a S&P 500 rather than looking at NASDAQ 100. NASDAQ 100 will show you the best returns, but don't buy in a fund which is showing the best return. Buy into a fund where you will get more consistency, more stability, more diversification, and a smooth journey going ahead. I'll give you a small data point. The fund which we manage, NASDAQ 100 ETF, this was launched in 2010, so about 11 years now, right? The fund's AUM was just about 75 crores 2 years back. 75 crores. Today it is 4,000 crores. So 2,900 crores has come after the index has zoomed off, right? It is all chasing the recent past performance, recency bias, what we call. So even if you have done that, now you stick on to this. So if they go through some amount of volatility, some amount of correction, stick on, keep your allocation there and keep a long-term approach. From incremental allocation perspective, I would suggest look at S&P 500, and then look, taking advice or help from your financial advisors. You should also look at emerging markets. You should look at Japan. You should look at Europe. So there are plenty of options now available everywhere. So put 25-30% of your portfolio outside India and rest of the portfolio within India. Also, given a fact that last 10 years has been not so good for India. Therefore, from margin of safety perspective, higher allocation to India will be advisable as compared to US per se. So sorry for the long answer, but
Sure. Great insight, Akhil. So I'll make a small announcement. So anybody has any question, please type in your question in Q&A box. While you're typing, I have one more question for Susmit. So Susmit, if you look at if you do the background history check, we took about almost 58 years to become $1 trillion economy, and as we speak today, we are at about $2.6 trillion in terms of the size of our GDP. US was at about 2.5 trillion. I remember during 2000, I think in 1981 or 82. So, what do you think when you look at Indian markets? Where do you think we are headed as an economy, and what similarity or what trend that you see India is going to pick up, or you see that there is no correlation?
So, there are about 220 countries in the world. Only 3 countries have reached $5 trillion GDP. Only 3 countries, right? And please remember, it's not like the other 217 companies don't want to grow. Okay, I'm done. I've reached 1 trillion. Mera ho gaya. but it takes a lot to reach 5 trillion. So only 3 countries reach 5 trillion. India, unless something really geographically goes wrong, I see no reason why we will not be the fourth country to reach 5 trillion. US took 10 years, 1980 to 1990, to make that journey from 2.5 to 5. And China was obviously in a super turbo mode. They did it in 5 years. Japan also took about 7-8 years. I think we will take about 10 years, right? Which is the next 10 years, 2020 to 2019 to 2030. We will go from $2.5 trillion to $5 trillion. This is, I would say, the most significant economic journey that we all will be a part of. Why do I say that? Because we will go from being a poor country to a middle class country. $2,000 is considered to be per capita is considered to be just about breaking even. And when you go from 2 to nearly 4, 4.5, it just changes the society. I've been going to Hong Kong for the last 20 years. And let me tell you, if you went to Hong Kong 17, 18 years ago, you would struggle to get Indian food. You had to go all the way to cross the bridge and go to the other island. Today, you can throw a stone and you can get whatever food you want. Right? And it's changed dramatically. I think we will go through that same change in the next 10 years. Some of our cities will become unrecognizable, according to me, in the next 10 years. The easiest way to think about this is think about your driver or your domestic help and how their lives have transformed in the last 10 years. Right? If you had a chauffeur 10 years ago, what his lifestyle was, or what he would wear, how he would travel, would he have a mobile phone or not? Right? And today, think about what they are leading their lifestyle. Right? So that's how the whole society will get uplifted. So I'm very bullish on the next 10 years in India. And I think it's despite or in spite the government. Right? So we will grow with or without the government. Doesn't matter who's there. You can't stop 30 crore young men and women trying to find a job. You can't stop it.
So you said with government and without government. So
Yeah.
our honorable Prime Minister talked about we achieving $5 trillion economy in 2025. You think it is a very ambitious number, or you think?
No, it's not possible. I mean, target setting, right? We all know target setting. Akhil would have set unreasonable targets for you as well when you were with him. So, every boss sets unreasonable targets. And I think he set it because he saw China doing it in 5 years, right? So that is the same. He wanted to be the best. I mean, that's not wrong. I mean, you have to dream big. If you don't dream big, you will not achieve, you can't even achieve big. Right? So they say that you miss all the shots that you don't play. Right? That's what they say in cricket. So he's trying to play that shot. If he misses, at least you will get in 10 years. So I think it's a great target to have.
Sure. So then the market cap of India would also be in line with the size of the economy.
At least.
Considering 1:1 ratio.
I mean, market cap to GDP actually has a little bit of an exponential function. As the GDP becomes bigger, you become a more stable society. You become less cyclical, right? So imagine at $5 trillion GDP, we may not talk about monsoon, right? How monsoon will impact. It's so funny, right? After 75 years of independence, we are still talking about how monsoon impacts Indian agriculture. Right? So I think maybe in 10 years down the line, we will not talk about, not open our windows in the month of June and say ki barish aaya hai nahi. Right? So a lot of things may change.
Yeah. So you also talked about China growing from $2.5 to $5 trillion within, I think, 5 years, from 2003 to 2008, perhaps. So what do you think? What are the key 3-4 things that did right, which probably helped them to grow to that level? What India could learn?
Everything went right. I mean, you name what did not go right. The world was in a global tailwind, right? US, by the way, if you know that 2000 to 2010 was one of the worst decades for US, right? Because they just came out of .com and they immediately in 3 years went into subprime, right? So money had to go somewhere. So US was not doing well. Euro was getting formed. Euro was struggling. There was a huge amount of capital that was trying to find its way. and China was at the peak of demographic dividend, right? Was at its peak, and they really, that time there was no WTO, nothing. The world had no policies. Like today we talk about ESG and this and that. That time there was nothing. You could, you've seen those horror photos of sweatshops of China, but there was no stopping them for that 5 years. I think they were in a runaway. Everything went right, from capital to demography to policy to global. Just everything went right. Everything.
All right. So now we are opening the forum for Q&A. The first question is, during the Berkshire Hathaway's AGM, there were a few questions with regards to ESG. What is your understanding? I think Warren answered that question. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if I remember right, Warren said
he had given it a pass, I think, and he said that in the voting, most of the shareholders gave vote against following the ESG guidelines or disclosures on the ESG guidelines. So I think he doesn't really want to be, and that's my sense. He doesn't want to be tied up with this whole ESG thing, and he wants to continue buying whatever he likes eventually. So I think it was more like a dodge on that question.
So I think two more things, which I believe that they strongly believe. First of all, they believe that they don't need a framework like ESG to invest. They don't need it because they have it set, right?
Yeah.
So Munger always says that we will never buy something that does harm to people. And he's been saying this for I don't know for how long, so maybe 60 years, right? Which is actually the core of ESG. What is ESG? Don't do something that harms society, shareholder, people, employee, etc., etc. Right? That is all ESG is.
Whatever is taught by your parents.
Yeah, that is all ESG is. And Munger has been saying. Munger said, "Why don't we own a tobacco company? We don't own a tobacco company because it does harm to others." Right? So for them, ESG is this one line: don't buy something which sells and it harms others. It's as simple as that. And I think it's bang on. It's so simple. I've also believed that if an organization needs to come and say that I'm doing this for ESG, which means they were not doing anything for ESG earlier, right? So I'm very wary of organizations which say that I will do this now, I will do this now, I will do this. So ab tak kya kar rahe the aap? So it's like if a fund manager comes and says, now I'm going to be careful about stock selection. What were you doing before that? So yeah, I think it's a good brand. See, again, it's like a brand. And whenever I realize that whenever this brand gets created or these acronyms get created and money starts chasing them, very soon the peak happens. You remember BRICS in 2010, BRICS. 2010 to 20 was the worst decade for emerging markets. Okay,
True.
And the peak of 2010 was all about BRICS. Right? I think in another 1 or 2 years, it'll be all about ESG, and that'll be the peak of those kind of companies. Right? They say that the most compliant ESG companies are Facebook and Twitter. I don't need to tell your participants how much toxic material is there on Facebook and Twitter.
Yeah.
Right? There is no parental control. What are we talking about?
Yeah, so next question comes from Mr. Anand Kumar. He says that market cap to GDP for India is above 100%. And if you look at both, even the US is more than 150, 180%. Is the valuation of market sustainable in future too? India?
Who knows? I don't know. Very tough to answer these questions. All I know is that, see, there are two aspects to market, right? One is economy or earnings, correct? And the second is interest rates. Both these factors play an important role for you to understand valuations. Now, if you believe that India's GDP can now grow at 10 to 12%, let's say for the next 5 years, right? Because you're coming off a very low base, then assuming it's 100% market cap to GDP, you'll get 10 to 12% return. Correct? The other part is now interest rates. And again, Mr. Buffett says that interest rates are like gravity. Right? Lower the interest rates, higher the valuations. Correct? Higher the interest rates, lower the valuation. So and I think the reason that US equity markets are 180%, 200% market cap to GDP is because interest rates are zero. Right? So if interest rates go up, it acts as a factor that pulls down valuations. So it's an interplay between the two. I have no doubt in my mind that if interest rates remain where we are, valuations remain where we are, you will still make 10 to 12% CAGR in markets, even from these levels. Correct? And if you have a good fund, you'll make 15%. Right? But if, let's say, interest rates go up by, for some reason, go to 8-9%, then obviously it will have an impact on your returns. So always remember, it's an interplay between the two. It's never one.
Question from my end, Sushmit, is that you have been tracking all the international markets. There are markets which are like more than 150%, 200% of the of the GDP in terms of market caps. So what should be the fair valuation? What should be the fair ratio?
Why am I trying to even do market cap to GDP fair? See, Warren Buffett used this as a great indicator when the world was normal. The world is abnormal. If I tell you that, I think for a month in which country I forget, I think it's Switzerland or somewhere, housing loan people got money for taking a loan. आप समझ रहे हो? आपने हाउसिंग लोन लिया, उसके लिए आपको इंटरेस्ट मिला. Wrap your head around that, right? So see, these are very, very as they said, right? If you don't understand, it's perfectly natural because these are completely weird times, right? So within a weird time, you're trying to find out a perfect number. You will not get it with us, right? If you were to tell me that, okay, let's say interest rates go back to normal of 3 to 4%, then what should happen? Then obviously market capital GDP for US will come down to 120%, 125%, and India will come down to 80-85%. Right? But we've been talking about interest rates going to 4% since 2015 taper tantrum. तभी तक तो नीचे ही गया, ऊपर नहीं गया. So it's too dynamic, and frankly I don't understand. Beyond a point, I don't think anybody understands. If anybody claims to understand, then I don't know how.
This is for Akhil. The question comes from Mr. Gupta, who's the most seasoned investor coming from Kolkata. So what he wants to know is that $5 trillion of GDP size, what will be the value of Sensex in India?
1 lakh.
Simple math.
5 trillion will be the market cap. So you divide that by shares outstanding, you will get the number. It will be around 1 lakh. If you take, okay, if I have to give you a conservative number, it might be 80,000. So let's say the 10-year market cap to GDP average is around 75-80%. So it might be 75-80,000 or maybe slightly over a lakh, but clearly doubling from here.
Let me tell you, if we reach 5 trillion, then Akhil will definitely be wrong, right? So I think
it can be like US, right? 2 times.
I mean, we don't. Again, if you go by what US went through as a country from 1980 to 1990. And the transformation that happened there, the way China transformed, the way Japan transformed, it will be difficult for us to understand how India will transform, right? We know broadly, I think Akhil put it beautifully, that broadly, you know, ki $2.5 trillion GDP, 50,000 Sensex, 5 trillion GDP, 1 lakh Sensex, right? But it could be a big positive surprise.
It could be a big mismatch.
Yeah, मतलब कैसे आपको क्या, अगर मैं तो बोलता हूँ अभी भी, राइट, इंडिया में आज भी कितनी गाड़ियां बिकती है, राइट? बिकती ही नहीं है गाड़ियां. तो आपको लगेगा कि 25 crore more people can buy cars in the next 10 years, तो फिर कैसे गणित नहीं लगा पाओगे?
Yeah. So next question is, there are two major factors for Indian economy. One is inflation and the other one is the huge money chasing the less number of opportunities. So what will be the overall effect on Indian stock market going ahead?
देखिए, ह्यूज मनी इज अगेन कमिंग फ्रॉम लो इंटरेस्ट रेट्स, राइट? अगर मैं आपको एफडी में 9% दूं, तो ह्यूज मनी विल नॉट कम इनटू इट, राइट? सो व्हेनेवर इंटरेस्ट रेट्स आर लो, हाउ, सी, व्हाट इज द कनेक्शन बिटवीन इंटरेस्ट रेट्स एंड हायर मार्केट्स? Low interest rates, more and more money comes into equities, because equities, there are companies which still generate 15% ROE, right? तो आप वहां आ जाते हो. So that's the direct correlation. So now why? So that is the first part. The second part is why very few stocks. Now we saw this from 97 to 2002, and we are seeing this again in the last 4 years, that whenever the economy shrinks or slows down, the number of companies who grow in that slowdown are very few. Right? Again, if I can give you an example, that all of you, if your professionals would have gone through that, if your company does not grow very fast, the bonus pool shrinks, so very few people get, right? But if your company grows very fast, bonus pool increases, a lot more people get. Same thing is with economy and companies. If the economy doesn't grow fast, very few companies can grow because it's very little place to grow, right? क्योंकि ग्रोथ क्या है, मैं अगर 2 ट्रिलियन पे 5% ग्रोथ करता हूं तो 100 बिलियन ही आई एम स्प्रेडिंग इन द इकोनॉमी, right? But if my 2 trillion grows by 10%, then I'm spreading 200 billion of growth. Right? So if the economy grows at 10 to 12% for the next 4 years, which has not happened in the last 4 years, then you will see a lot more companies growing faster, and then money will shift towards that as well.
All right. Next question is for Akhil again. Should we be investing in Nifty 50 or S&P 500 at such high valuations? What is your take?
I think I would do 70-30, 70 with Nifty 50 and 30% S&P 500. That's the way actually I'm doing personally, honestly.
Sure. Okay. Next question is for...
I want to say also.
Yeah.
Please add.
I have 0 in US, 0 in real estate, 100% in equity. Indian equity.
100% India.
100%. Yeah. I have a simple philosophy that in the next 10 years, if we don't reach $5 trillion GDP, then something has gone horribly wrong, right? But if we reach, we will make so much money in the market, so much money that you will not be able to imagine. Please don't go by the last 10 years, right? Somehow try and look at, maybe Vikas, you can share with them, try and look at some reports of 2004, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. See what those periods were, right? We only have heard the bad news of the last 10 years, right? Where if you buy a 10-12% profit growth company, you make a lot of money. Right? You buy Hindustan Liver and you make a lot of money. You buy Nestle and you make a lot of money. These companies grow only at 12-15%. There have been periods where companies have consistently grown at 25-35%. So वो वापस आएंगे वो दिन, right?
Great insights, Susmit. You look to be extremely bullish in Indian economy.
Very. Yeah, we have paid our dues in the last 10 years. Negative dollar return in 10 years. हम इतने भी खराब नहीं हैं, right? मतलब इतने भी नहीं हैं. तो वो, I think we have paid our dues. I think 2010 was super elevated. 2020 is super bottom. I think we've paid our dues. You'll obviously have volatility. I'm not saying it's going to be like one-way streak, right? I mean, we may go to 15,500, 16,000, come back to 13,000 and all that. You will have volatility on the way. But if you were to take a 10-year view, I think India, among the large markets, India could be one of the best performing markets in the world.
But I'll just add one caveat, not going, of course, I'm as aggressive on equity as Indian equities as Sushmit is, but from financial planning perspective, so I've got kids now who, let's say, come up for post-graduation after 7, 8, 9 years, maybe. I'm sure they will go abroad. So then you need to have certain assets which are dollar denominated. So in case the INR continues to depreciate, it's likely to do that. So you have some assets where it doesn't hit you because of the currency depreciation. So that's a financial planning angle stitched to it. But apart from that, if that would not be the limitation, I think I love India.
Sure. So if valuation is the only way to look at, then probably this is not the right answer. But yeah, from an allocation perspective, what Akhil said, it is very important. And I'm sure a lot of investors would be watching this.
Fund managers will have a different view because they are more clued on to what's happening, what they're doing, what funds they manage. They know what they can expect over a period of time. Investors like us who are not so clued onto markets and companies and businesses, we need to balance our risk. We need to diversify and we need to look at opportunities. And you need to invest. Basically, what we are saying is that diversification is basically putting eggs in several baskets which are non-correlated. So several assets which don't have correlation with each other. So at any given point of time, you have few asset classes which are giving you good returns, and few asset classes might give you a drag. But on an average basis, you will make your desired return. That is the principle of asset allocation.
Yeah, next question is Buffett criteria of consistent earning power, ROE, capable management, and sensibly priced of value investing can be exactly applied to Indian markets even in present era.
Exactly.
Is that true?
Yeah,
That's what we do every day.
that's our philosophy.
That's our philosophy, QGLP. Buy quality companies run by quality people who can grow by reinvesting their profits uh, and for a long period of time. And you can buy all this at a reasonable price. See, we don't want to buy cheap. We want to buy it at a reasonable price. You don't get anything cheap. Any good thing, right? Have you ever bought a Mercedes car at the price of Maruti 800? Never. Right? Uh, so you can buy great companies at good price. And that's what buy great prices. Don't look companies at wonderful prices. And I think it's possible. See, it will get tougher and tougher. Please remember, Mr. Anand, that you find it more difficult, right? Because markets evolve. There are so many people who are getting into the market now. They are all bettering the market, right? So markets will keep evolving. I have personally bought. I mean, Ramdev keeps us telling us stories about how he's bought stocks at one-time earnings, two-time earnings. I have bought stocks. I remember buying a stock 6 years ago called Tata Sponge. It was trading at below cash. A Tata company trading below cash, right? So once in a while you'll get these opportunities, but you will not get these opportunities forever, right? So you have to then keep upgrading your knowledge, keep upgrading, and see what you can understand and buy.
Yeah, so last two questions before we conclude the session. So what, according to your views, are the sector that you expect to do good over the next 3 to 5 years?
Uh, I think I would be the most bullish on the housing sector. And not, I mean, you don't have to necessarily buy developers. You can buy housing finance companies, anything related to housing demand, right? I'm very, very bullish on that. Second is life insurance, very bullish on that. And that is something that we've taken as a whole house call. Our largest allocations to in our funds are in life insurance companies. That is the second sector. And third, I think pharmaceutical, right? Not necessarily chemical API companies, but pharmaceutical companies from again a 7 to 8 year view. Again, very close to this $2.5 to $5 trillion GDP journey, where when you get older and richer, you actually spend more on pharmaceutical, right? When you're a young country, 22-year-old country, who's going to buy medicines, right? I don't know if you know, but in 2019, as a country, we spent more on alcohol than on medicine. Right? We spent 1.5 lakh crore on alcohol and 1.4 lakh crore on medicine. So that's how young the country is. Obviously, we are going to get older, so you will spend more and more on medicine. So I think these three sectors would be my topics, all connected to residential, housing demand, then pharmaceutical and life insurance. You're on mute, Vikas.
So last question from our end. So there's a question for Susmeet. Susmeet sir, do you believe that Indian markets valuations are not at very high levels right now?
So, sir, it depends on your time horizon, right? So, if you ask me 10-year time horizon, are they expensive? No. 6-month time horizon, are they expensive? Maybe. So, it really depends on what your time horizon is. I think both Akhil and I, we have the firm belief that over the next 10 years, you will make anywhere between 3 to 4 times in the markets, which is 15% CAGR. So, whether you buy it now or 5% lower or 10% lower, it really will not make that much of a difference. But if you're trying to say, okay, what am I going to do in 6 months? Very difficult to answer that question. But I would tend to believe that From a 10-year view, we are not overvalued. From a 6 to 9 month view, obviously, I mean, it's obvious that we look overvalued because we have gone up 100% in 12 months. Right? So I think your time horizon is very, very important when you make that decision or when you ask that question. So I hope I've answered. 6 months expensive, 10 years very reasonable.
All right, so we'll conclude the session here. Once again, I would like to thank all the participants for joining in today. I hope that we are able to add value to all of you in terms of knowledge. In case you have any other question, please feel free to write to me at vikas@aifpms.com. I will have this sent to Sushmita and Akhil and answered all your questions in case anything is left out. Since we are running short of time, so we are not taking any more questions. And I also take this opportunity to thank both of you gentlemen for taking the time out from your busy schedule, answering all the questions so patiently. And thank you, Akhil, for helping us to organize this session. So I highly appreciate your efforts.
Thank you, Vikas. Keep doing the good work. You're on the right direction. Best wishes. God bless you. And God bless all of you. Take care. Stay safe. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vikas. I really enjoyed a lot. Thank you very much. Everybody stay safe.
Yeah, same to you.